I think part of what he started doing was doing some reconditioning.
If you want to take everything they're saying as true, for purposes of argument, and again, I'm not stipulating that, but if you want to take everything they're saying as true, we're talking about wine here.
Oh my God!
91 Rich Montebello that you wanted.
Here's a wine over here, something that people have tasted that they're saying is the best ever. Well, if you can make something taste like that, why not recreate that experience? And I think that that's what happened.
They tried to make that sound like it was alchemy, you know, like he was mixing and matching and contriving. But that's not what I think it was at all. I think Rudy just really digs wine.
Oh, this is... What is Rudy? We got a chair.
We're all insecure.
Should be okay.
My God, man, that's it, man. That's awesome, huh?
And if we're the new kid in the group, we're really insecure. And especially if everybody else in the group is older, if everybody else in the group is richer, you want to live up to whatever the expectations are. The only government evidence was relating to something that would have been a couple of bottles at a time, perhaps being made in the kitchen sink in Rudy's house in Arcadia. I don't think that you could have created the number of bottles they claim that were counterfeit doing that. So they have a problem with that.
This bottle, 1985 Côte Rôtie La Moline, is from the famous crazy wine auction, the cellar auction, where all the shit happened, Rudy's auction. The cellar was Rudy's cellar, and you will see this is very real. So this is an example of 90% of Rudy's wine that he sold that is real. It's fantastic, as everyone's going to see.
Yeah, this one is real.
So he did sell mostly real wine, I think.
He had an incredible palate, and he was also very
God,
generous.
This is so good.
He was incredibly.
It's rare and
Do you want to use a
perfect.
fork because it's on camera?
No, I'm just going to do my hands.
Yeah, go for it.
Let's do it.
Here we go.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Matthew. How are you, babe?
Everything's good? How are those wines?
Fucking awesome.
Were you just walking down the street drinking wine?
No, we took a car here. Oh. We are not able to drive right now, so we had a driver. This is one of the ones that Rudy sold. Try this, please. It's outstanding. It's as good as it gets.
It does taste really good.
Thank you so much. Christian. So this is a bottle that Levy bought from Rudy. It's real. He bought it from...
How long has this been open?
About 2 hours.
It's garbage.
You don't like it? You think it's fake? Really?
I know this wine very well. It's not even close. It doesn't have the life, doesn't have the verve and the vivacity and the dimension of La Moline 85, which is almost like if you had a really rich BLT with the egg on top. That's how that wine tastes almost. This, I mean, it tastes like, you know, skunk juice.
So that's very interesting.
How much of the Rudy wine do you have?
I don't know. 6 bottles or something.
He has 6,000 bottles.
There's a kind of collaboration between the forger and the dupe. People kind of want to be fooled. You really want to own this very rare bottle of wine that maybe doesn't even exist anymore. And so you don't really want to know that it's a fake.
If you believe that Rudy Kurniawan was just trying to recondition the bottles and give them a nicer appearance, then you probably believe that in a few weeks, a man with a white beard is going to come down your chimney and leave a case of 1945 Romani Conti under your tree. I became interested in this investigation when I met Jim Wynn, the FBI agent assigned to it. I sensed right away that there was going to be an actual charge that could be made. We certainly had overwhelming evidence.
A connoisseur of counterfeiting who mastered label making, cork stamping.
He had been purchasing things like extremely large quantities, thousands of dollars of wax. He was ordering paper that was known for its antique properties that can be used to make labels. He was collecting dozens and dozens of empty bottles from restaurants.
I always keep my empty bottles, you know that. And people ask me why. I actually put the date and the place that I had, where, you know, and who I had with, and kind of simple notes at the back of the bottle.
Rudy's explanation was that he was creating a museum of some kind, or he was doing a photo shoot of some kind. He was scanning labels into his computer, and then he was printing them on a huge printer that was in the house.
What I'm doing is forensically looking at the wines. After having scanned through and cataloged all the evidence from Rudy's computers, what I can say is this is definitely Rudy's because here's the template that made it. There are notebooks upon notebooks in evidence of Rudy's tasting notes. One of the really interesting pieces of evidence I thought was a half bottle that had writing on it, and he had M45 and he had a formula. So that was 1945 Mouton. And he had his first formula that he had blended, and he didn't like that. He had that scribbled out, and then on the other side, he had another formula for M45 that he liked better. So I think that it was a lot of trial and error, and it was a lot of blending. He would take these old wines that he had tasted once. He found other wines that had similar characteristics, and he just mad scientisted it.
What he would make was generally a very convincing imitation of what it said on the label. It's easy to dismiss all this and say, oh, these guys are sniffing and swirling, and it's all a crock of shit, and you could fool. Well, the fact is, most of these guys, you couldn't fool them most of the time. That's what's interesting about Rudy's fraud, is that hardly anybody could have done it. He was a bit of an artist.
This one which is dirty on the side and not in the middle. It was well done, actually, but too much well done because there is nearly a line between the dirt and the non-dirt. My theory is easy. To fake one bottle, you need 1 hour. If you have the labels, the wax, and everything. Just to eliminate the original label, the capsule, and then clean it, put the new label on it, dirt it, again, put the wax and everything. It takes 1 hour. When you know that one of the big sale was 15,000 bottles or something like that, if you multiply the number of bottles by 1 hour, 15,000 hours. So it's impossible. I mean, technically, it's impossible that he could do it. He could have done it on his own.
We know that some of the paper came from Indonesia. His brothers were in Indonesia. We knew that there was money going to his brothers in Indonesia. It was pretty evident to us that this was kind of a family affair.
Are you independently wealthy? What? Are you independently wealthy?
No, I'm broke.
No, I'm trying to...
I scam people to drink their wines.
When we spoke to witnesses and when we conducted our investigation, one thing that was pretty consistent was that no one really knew the source of his purported wealth, and no one actually knew his background. His legally registered name is Rudy Kurniawan, but he has operated under different names. He operated under the name Lenwadi Tan or Lenny Tan, which is actually his mother's name.
To answer your question, I come from a wealthy family. Good family.
No, that's not what the reason.
The names for Rudy Kurniawan and his brother Dar Saputra, those are both the names of famous Indonesian badminton players.
His father gave him that name because it is an Indonesian name. Rudy was of Chinese descent, and there was a period of time when there was a huge amount of even danger to people of Chinese descent that were living in Indonesia. The family was reasonably well-to-do and involved in a number of business interests, and they've been successful. They're fairly reserved in terms of talking much about the family.
I come from a wealthy family. Good family.
This guy, he's recreating himself. It's like he was in the witness protection program. Who backed him? Where did his money come from? Who created him? We started receiving information through sources in the banking community and in the business community in Jakarta that there was a link between Lenwadi Tan's brothers being involved in the largest bank heist in the history of Jakarta.
Kejaksaan Agung belum mampu melakukan ekstradisi terhadap buronan pembobol bank Bapindo Edi Tansil.
Walaupun keberadaan Edi sudah diketahui berada di Cina.
One of them is Eddie Tanzel, who's still a fugitive in China. Eddie broke out of prison and escaped after stealing all the proceeds of a bank.
Buron penggelapan uang sebesar 565 juta dolar Amerika yang didapat dari kredit bank Bapindo tersebut.
And the other brother, Henry Raharja, had a bank, Harapan Sentosa, and he walked away with hundreds of millions of dollars. He just stole it and then fled to Australia.
Hendra Raharja is accused of Indonesia's biggest corporate fraud, defrauding $670 million.
This is really painful, for us, for all the clients of the banks. I saved my money for about 30 years.
One of the properties that Hendrik Raharja claimed to own was Jalan Galamaja. And I was like, whoa, this is the coincidence. It's just, I don't believe in coincidences.
Our governments and people of Indonesia call on all Raharja's family members and associates to come clean and surrender themselves to account for their grotesque crimes.
Do you have any indication of where the money might be? Is it in bank accounts or is it in property? Or is it...
Well, I don't want to signal our shots in that regard, but we do believe that there are assets overseas.
Oh, I'm gonna meet somebody at 12:30 in Westwood, so I could...
I don't know if Rudy was benefiting from Eddie Tanzel and his mother's family's thievery. Maybe that's why the backstory was created when he came to the United States.
Once this guy was a rock star in the world of rare, expensive wine. And now Rudy Kurniawan is on trial for fraud here in New York, accused of making millions selling counterfeit wines to unsuspecting...
I don't want to be away from the trial. When Rudy will be in front of me, eyes into eyes, I want to let him know that I know what he has done. And it's not a satisfaction that someone goes to jail, but this is so important for Burgundy. If Rudy, at the end of the trial, is free, I can't believe in anything anymore in life. Maybe I will become a monk. I'm worried. I don't know what will happen. I'm in America, I'm French, and I have to make my testimony in English. It makes me a little nervous.
He turned his home into a wine factory, said prosecutor Joseph Facciaponte of the defendant, and created what he called his magic cellar.
He decided to plead not guilty. Sometimes, certainly in the area of financial fraud, there are defendants who basically don't want to accept reality. They choose not to acknowledge it.
When I got into the room, I found him a little slimmer. He lost weight in prison, probably. It's never something you can like when you see someone on the ground.
The Sherlock Holmes of French wine. Laurent Ponceau's crusade to sniff out the fraudster who was faking his vintage wines began about 5 years ago and ended here at Manhattan's Federal District Court this week.
At a certain point of my testimony, our eyes for once get in touch, and he smiled to me, and he made me a little sign with his head and smiled to me. I found it bizarre, but in the meantime, nice.
The first person ever to be convicted for selling fake wine in the U.S. will spend the next 10 years bottled up in a jail cell. Fraudster Rudy Kurniawan will also pay $28.4 million back to victims.
Hi, what's your reaction to the trial today?
Very surprised, stunned, I think. We did not expect the judge to impose a sentence at that length.
Rudy has apologized to the New York judge, saying wine became my life and I lost myself in it. An obsession that will be hard to pursue from behind bars.
I've had organized crime cases with dead bodies for less time. That's the truth. Dead bodies, less time.
The harm that was actually done in this case does not justify the kind of sentence that was handed out. It just doesn't.
But he didn't profit from the crime as much as other people did. And the people who profited the most from his crime are living large and drinking great wine, and they're not in jail, and they get,
Others have suggested that there are additional people that should be prosecuted. But to bring a criminal prosecution, it's not enough to say that they were negligent. You have to prove that they intended to defraud someone by lying to them or making misrepresentations.
It's kind of like a game of musical chairs, and Rudy was the last one standing when the music stopped.
do. La 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 la
This is the largest wine seizure the U.S. Marshals have ever handled. Behind you, we have over 500 bottles that have been deemed counterfeit from Rudy Cherniowan's private collection.
I have no doubt that it's going to take years or decades or maybe never to fully filter out all of Rudy Cherniowan's fake wines. It's impossible to identify every single person who has one of those bottles.
You know, more scrupulous collectors have just bitten the bullet and they've written off a bunch of stuff. John Capon, to his credit, has you know, anything questionable he has taken back, and he's refunded a lot of people's money.
Good.
But I think a lot of people probably don't want to know that their cellars are full of fakes.
And game the system. And this system had been gamed.
When I first discovered this case of wine that he sold me was fake, I was very hurt. And I felt like a fool, too. I felt foolish. But the number of amazing experiences I had with him far outweigh any anger I could have. So I forgave, you know? I forgave that.
When I think about him, and I think about him quite a bit, that I just cannot put two and two together. I just can't, because it's just like talking about black and white.
Oh, Vincent,
I have not tried, but I would love to see him. One day I hope I'll be able to sit down with him. I don't know, I'll just tell him, what was this all about?